Hey everyone, it's Amit. So the state of Illinois has got a lot of great things going for it, okay? It's got one of the largest and greatest cities in the world in the city of Chicago. It's got one of the tallest skyscrapers in the world in the Willis Tower. It's got some of the greatest architecture of any city in the United States, arguably. It's also got one of the greatest franchises in the Chicago Cubs. It's also home to the deep dish pizza and of course the Chicago style hot dog as well. In addition to that though, or conversely, the city of Chicago is also known to be the murder capital. In addition to that, the city of Chicago as well as the accompanying suburbs are known for the least level of property appreciation when compared to other cities of the same size and scale in the United States. And these other cities that you would compare it against are several cities out in the West Coast, cities out in the East Coast, cities out in the Southeast and Florida, cities even in the mid-central area such as Nashville, and of course cities down in Texas as well. So there's several reasons in terms of the why property values don't appreciate as much in the city of Chicago. But with the imposition of new ordinances such as the RTLO, which has basically been in effect since June but is really going to be taking hand now, there's going to potentially be some level of decline in the property values in Illinois in the not too distant future. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. What's going on? What is this whole RTLO thing? Why is it so unfavorable to the landlord community? Why it's arguably beneficial to tenants? Why it may perhaps impact other homeowners who are basically not in this whole investment property game. But before I get too far into it, don't forget to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell, and let's get into it. So what is this whole RTLO thing? RTLO is an acronym that basically stands for Residential Tenant Landlord Ordinance. Okay, so that's what the RTLO is. It includes various provisions. It was basically put into place in June or July of 2021, so it's a couple of months underway, but it's really going to start taking hold now, okay, because the eviction moratorium in Illinois is going to lift on October 3rd, 2021, assuming, of course, the governor does not go ahead and extend the eviction moratorium out. But what will happen at that point in time is likely there's going to be a lift or a spike in the number of evictions that are out there, and when or in the event the landlord is able to get the tenant out of the property, and if they're going to get a new tenant in, or if they're even going to renew a lease with an existing tenant, this RTLO would basically be applicable. Okay, so what are the provisions of the RTLO which makes it kind of a nuisance or relatively less satisfactory in the eyes of the landlord? So there's several of these types of provisions. One of them relates to this whole notion of late fees. So in the event that a tenant has not paid fees or paid rent to a landlord within the prescribed period of time, the landlord can only charge $10 in late fees, assuming, of course, that the property is rented out for $1,000 or less. In the event that the property was rented out for more than $1,000, the landlord can only charge $10 of late fees plus 5% of any amount in addition to that $1,000, right? Another provision in this whole thing is this notion of back rent, okay? So for example, if your tenant is not paying rent, you can basically tell them or give them a notification that basically says, hey, within 5 days, I want you to remedy this situation. If you don't, this will be subject to eviction. And then you can start up the eviction proceedings. But the key thing about the RTLO is that it does not allow you to charge back any of the eviction filing fees, either related to lawyers or it relates to just general filing fees when it goes to the whole eviction process, to the tenant, okay? And at any point in time during this process, which as we know in various states such as Illinois could arguably take several months, the tenant decides to basically remedy the situation, you have to dismiss the case. So the landlord has to dismiss the case. So any fees that went into this whole process is basically lost because you cannot collect any of it from the tenant. Conversely, if the landlord is not holding up their end of the bargain and the tenant takes their landlord to court for whatever the reason might be, the tenant can basically charge the landlord for any of the court-related fees, attorney fees, all that other stuff. Now, from a tenant standpoint, if the landlord is basically not doing their part when it comes to a lot of the repairs, what the tenant can do is they can withhold a portion of the rent in order to basically repair whatever portion of the property was potentially impacted. But that's not the issue, right? The issue is the tenant does not necessarily need to provide all documentation to the landlord of the amount amount of costs that were incurred when it came to that particular repair. Another thing as it relates to this whole RTLO is there could be a variety of different reasons why a landlord may potentially decide to evict a tenant, right? So if a landlord decides to evict based on any of those other reasons, what they need to do is they basically need to provide a 10-day notification period, and after that they need to provide an incremental 60 days for the tenant to basically vacate the property if they did not remedy the situation in that original 10 days. So you can imagine what's happening here, right? You're looking at about a 70-day period such that this tenant, who's perhaps already breached this whole landlord-tenant agreement, is staying in that property for an incremental 70 days. So arguably there could perhaps be a significantly incremental amount of damage that basically goes into that given property. Now there are other provisions in the RTLO which makes a lot of sense, right? These are just the ones that makes it less desirable when it comes to the landlord. But yeah, there are provisions around, how many days notice should the landlord give the tenant before they actually go into the property, and how, landlords are required to provide heat to the tenant, and that is especially relevant in the state of Illinois for that matter, where winters can effectively be a bear. But landlords really need to think about this thing quite significantly when it comes to, on a go-forward basis, whether they want to continue in this whole investment game in the city of Chicago, the accompanying suburbs, and arguably in the state of Illinois as a whole, because it's really the city of Chicago that basically holds all the weight in the state of Illinois. Now, one thing that I've talked about in prior videos as well is a significant portion of landlords are basically these mom and pop type of landlords. They make up about 30% of all landlords that are basically out there. If these landlords effectively decide that, hey, once we're done with their evicting the tenant, and they put their properties in the market because they do not want to deal with the provisions of the RTLO on a go-forward basis, what they may decide to do is basically just put the house up for sale, and therefore there could be a spike in the amount of inventory that's basically out there. Now, arguably, this could be potentially a boon if you're in the market to effectively buy a home. But if you are already a homeowner, this could perhaps be quite problematic, because it could drop the values of homes in general. Additionally, when it comes to a lot of these tenants, what sometimes happens in these types of circumstances is when the mom and pops get out of the game, the large landlord groups basically take over, okay? So now these tenants effectively have to deal with larger landlord groups, which arguably can be quite challenging. This could also impact the market when it comes to new construction. But if there is reduced demand when it comes to a lot of these landlords and landlord groups, then there could be a reduction in the amount of new development that basically takes place in the city, which could also have an adverse impact to the housing market in Chicago and its accompanying suburbs as well. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts when it comes to investing in real estate and getting into these landlord-tenant type of relationships in the city of Chicago, its accompanying suburbs, and for that matter, the state of Illinois? Include all of those in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the contents of this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell, and I will see you in the next one.